Nick's work is very special in many ways. He's the master of what I call mid-tone painting. He never uses strong colours like vermilion or strong blues or cadmium yellows. It's always that mid-range. Very, very difficult to paint with and hold that down. The temptation to put a bright piece of paint in the middle of a picture or a touch of red, as Constable used to do, Nick refrained from doing that, and I admire him for it.
I don't think he got the recognition he deserved whilst he was alive, which is a great pity. I think if he was shown in the right place, he would get greater recognition, which his family will see, but unfortunately he won't.
Oh, but there have been so many artists who have not been recognised in their own time, and then, you know, years later have been rediscovered. And I think what he's done is created work that is timeless, and he's pursued his ideal, and he's created work that doesn't fit a fashion, but that does mean it will probably last longer and have is waiting to be discovered, I think.
Nicholas Simington was almost 40 years of age before his dream of becoming a professional artist started to take shape. It was only then that his talent began gaining recognition amongst fellow artists, art reviewers and gallery owners. An early high point of his emerging career was a summer show at the prestigious Serpentine Art Gallery in London, which championed new ideas in contemporary art and provided an invaluable platform for emerging artists. In 1982, Nicholas's work was selected by John Lessor to be shown in the summer show he was curating.
It was John Lessor who said to Nick when he came to see the gallery, to see the studio and see Nick's paintings, he said that he couldn't get the images out of his mind, that he'd looked at lots of artists' slides, but the ones that kept coming back into his head were Nick's.
Over the following 3 weeks that summer, Nicholas's distinctive canvases were seen by thousands of visitors. Family and friends hoped this would provide the long-awaited breakthrough for his career. Yet when the exhibition's doors closed, Nicholas Simington went home to Old Buckenham in Norfolk and carried on painting in his studio behind his cottage for the next 35 years, relatively unknown.
The studio was an Aladdin's cave. I have very fond memories of being in the studio and watching him paint. Yeah, it was very different because his values, his whole creative ethos, very non-materialistic, which is something that we took from him. And yeah, love it. It was great watching him work, seeing him be so creative.
He did stage a series of one-man shows in London and elsewhere, and his work was bought by private collectors from the United States, Canada, Australia and Italy, but he never achieved critical acclaim or commercial success in his lifetime. For many who admire and collect his art, this has remained a mystery. Nicholas Simington was born in Antwerp in 1930 to Irish parents. At the time, his father David was on secondment to General Motors. Nicholas was only months old when the family returned to Ireland, setting up home in Drogheda, some 30 miles north of Dublin. He enjoyed a happy childhood in that historic town, revisiting it on numerous occasions in later life to show his family the site of the family cottage, long since demolished and replaced by a modern house. In 1940, his parents took the extraordinary step of leaving neutral Ireland and moving the family to war-torn London after his father had obtained a position in the British Civil Service. Over the following 5 years, the family made several moves, eventually settling in Scotland. At the end of the war, his father David took up another civil service position, this time in Egypt.
When his parents went off to Egypt, Daddy was sent to a boarding school just outside Oxford, the Salesian College, and Daddy was not a kind of person who was cut out for boarding school at all. I think I would have hated it, and I'm very similar in temperament. And I know, because he talked about it many times, that he hated it. He hated almost every minute of it. The only bits he used to talk about were in a positive way. It was the art class. He studied art for the first time there. At school there was an art class, and he got a lot of positive feedback from the teachers who said he had a talent. And those were the only moments that sort of made the Salesian College bearable by his telling it.
Artistic talent ran in the family. An elderly second cousin, Frank Kelly, was an internationally acclaimed expert and designer of period costumes for screen and stage. Known as Uncle Frank, he would send Nicholas framed copies of his latest illustrations.
But he didn't really say in any way he influenced her, and I don't think he did. They were doing different things. The only thing might have been that he saw someone in the family could make a career out of something that wasn't an office job or a straight-laced job. And that may have, had an influence on him later on.
After national service, he reluctantly took up a series of mundane jobs in accountancy, which left him unfulfilled. In 1959, Nicholas's life changed dramatically when he met newly qualified schoolteacher Barbara Preston at a dance in Manchester. 2 years later, they married. The newlyweds soon swapped their home in Manchester for Carluke, a small town just outside Glasgow, where Nicholas had taken up a promotion as a cashier with the giant electrical firm AEI.
How he didn't like the job he was in, and he had several jobs, was really a square peg in a round hole every time. And he'd always wanted to go to art college. But when he was a teenager, those were the days when you did what your parents told you. They said there's no future in art, and he wasn't allowed to go. And a careers officer suggested he became a draftsman. He said, that's drawing. But he didn't go down that route. And he always went to night school. From the time I met him, he went to night school to art classes. But it was only when we moved to Scotland that he went to night classes at Glasgow School of Art and got a really professional tutor who told him he should go full time. Well, I can't remember how he first went to evening classes. He must have applied and went to evening classes. And his tutor there, William Crosby, he encouraged Nick to go full time. And Nick was working for AEI at the time and wasn't very happy. We'd been married 7 years, I suppose, by then. And although we, but particularly I, was always very keen on having a family, it didn't look as if it was going to happen. And I saw this advert in the paper. They were short of art teachers. They were applying for people to go to the Glasgow School of Art, get an art qualification and then a teaching qualification, and promised to teach for 2 years afterwards. So I was working and I showed it to him and said, it doesn't look as if I'm going to stop work to have a family, so why don't you go for it? So he applied. Although he'd got GCSE English, not GCSE, it was school certificate in those days, he had to take the Scottish qualification. He had to get higher English. So he went to night school for a year, got higher English, and then applied and was accepted. And he always said they were the best 4 years of his life. And of course, it was during those 4 years that both boys were born. He'd only been at the College about 4 months when I was pregnant. So it was good for both of us.
I've always enjoyed painting and drawing from the time I was a child. I won a lot of prizes at school, etc. So I always wanted to go to art school, and eventually got into the Glasgow School of Art. There you learn how to reproduce what you see and get the technical side of painting. After that, I realized that that wasn't all I wanted to do. I wanted to do more than that. I wanted to reproduce things that I admired in other painters, the paintings that I really loved, and painters I really loved. And these were, I found, had all got something in common. I thought they had this, children had the same thing. They were able to do, because they had no inhibitions, they would create a magical presence, something that was magical. Didn't have to be absolutely realistic. It had some presence, a magical presence. Now, when I thought about it, when I looked around various people, I found that people like Cézanne, I thought his were terrific, and they don't look, they're not done from the point of view of technique. It's not about technique, it's about a presence. When you look at them, they've got something, you can't put your finger on it. The other person is Piero, another one is Piero della Francesca. I think it's to do with forgetting about being absolutely realistic. You've got to sort of go with your inner feeling. You have to simplify and not get caught up in too much detail. I mean, that kills it. You just go for the feeling. If you get the feeling. When I thought about this, I thought, well, that's what I want to do, and then I had to discover how I could achieve that. And so when I paint something, I usually spend a long time in simplifying it. I start off with the thing that inspires me, and I think, right, I could do something with that. I get the, as you do with the sunset, if something triggers, I think that's fantastic. The design and the color, and instantly I have a picture in my head, an idea. So then I put that down and I will simplify. I'll do maybe half a dozen or a dozen variations on that to see which design achieves what I want, the magical presence. That's what I concentrate on, so that to do a painting for me could go, it just keeps going until I get that. When I look at it, I think it's got it. Now, sometimes you never really, sometimes the difference between your best and not your best is when you look at it and you think, well, it's got it. But some others you look at and you think, my God, that really there's something about it. I don't know what it is, but it's a humdinger.
Nicholas was now 38 years of age. Crosby encouraged him to study art full-time, and Nicholas got a grant that enabled him to attend the famous School of Art. Nicholas graduated with a diploma in art in 1972, and a couple of years later he, Barbara and their two young sons, Aidan and Liam, moved south to Norfolk, where he was to devote the rest of his life to painting, while Barbara supported the family by teaching.
It was two things. One, Nick had been contemplating it. He thought if we moved somewhere nearer to London, there might be a chance of a London gallery taking him on. We came to Norfolk because he had family here. His brother and sister-in-law were here. And what really gave us a push was we found out our house in Scotland was going to be compulsorily purchased. So we had to move anyway. So we thought, well, we might as well move in a big way. He worked part-time and painted part-time. And then I said, by that time, the boys were school age, or just about. Liam was just about to start school. So I think I said, well, I'll work full-time and you paint. So that's what we did. I just think he had this compulsion. He told me once that, not so much in latter years, but when he was younger, if he had a day when he didn't go into the studio, he felt guilty. He was really driven to paint, and he just seemed to have an endless supply of ideas. People fascinated him, and a lot of his paintings were people. And yes, he just felt it was what he had to do.
He wasn't a commercial painter. He didn't paint dogs on velvet cushions or chocolate box covers. Much like Bob Dylan, played what he wanted to play, and if the audience came along with him, that's fine. And if they didn't, they didn't. He painted what he wanted to paint. It was powerful stuff. You know, he had his fans, and they loved what he did, and they could feel it. So he stuck to that, stuck to his principles, while the world changed around him. I mean, he did sort of powerful pieces that I think will last the test of time. But the art market turned into a commodities market in the late 70s. And it became about buying fashionable names, the whole Jeff Koons and all that stuff. And then you get on to all the conceptual art. And, he didn't dismiss that. He engaged with it, and he thought about abstraction, and there's an element of abstraction. He didn't do photorealism. So there is an element of it's not photorealism, but it was about expressing a human feeling in a kind of classical composition. His compositions are just beautiful, and some people feel that, but he didn't move away to conceptual stuff to follow the fashion. He stuck at what he wanted to do, and some people came with him. He did say, he wasn't a chocolate box painter. He did say, I don't paint dogs on velvet cushions. People want stuff that looks good, that goes with their wallpaper. A lot of people, that's, what they want. And a lot of people who had the taste didn't have the money, and a lot of people who had the money didn't have the right taste. So I think it was frustrating for him. It's not true to say that he didn't care. He wanted to be recognized, but he also didn't want to compromise on the quality of the work that he was putting out. We would be in the middle of a lay-by, broken down, the bonnet up on the car, facing a 250-mile journey home, and he'd be worrying about how the toes go on his latest sketch. And that would be the only thing obsessing him, and everything else went on around him, and he was oblivious to it. At the time, when you're children, it just seems normal. When you grow up and meet people who've had different experiences, you realize how lucky you were in many ways, because you see the world through those artistic eyes, and you learn values that are not about money, not about commercialism. They're about the soul of things and the feelings that you get from things, and you know, going together, working together, living with people. I mean, it wasn't that he didn't love people. He loved a good discussion. He loved being with people. But the important things were not how you looked, were not keeping up with the Joneses, were not the car. It was about this emotion that he was creating, this beautiful works of art.
He never went anywhere without a sketchbook or a camera or something. He didn't need to sort of sit down and say art means a lot, because the fact is, if he had an idea, it would be, boys, can you go out into the garden, because I'm going to take some photographs of you, and whatever you do, don't smile. I remember that very well. And even if we were on holiday and driving along somewhere on the way to a beach or something, if he saw anything he liked, again, it would always be, can you stop the car, Barbara, and go back about half a mile back. There was a field and there was something I liked there. I'll take a photo of that. That might work for a painting. So I don't think he ever sort of said, well, boys, paint, but it was all he talked about. There were many people who were really passionate about Daddy's work. There were many collectors and the emails that you get from people who love the work is always great. And, while he was living and then again when he died, we heard from several people saying things like, why on earth your father isn't internationally renowned is beyond me. I have his paintings on every wall of my house and they bring me joy every day. Things like that. And so for those people and for me, he was probably the best artist that you've never heard of.
I think he didn't receive the recognition we thought he should, partly because of the time when he graduated and started painting full time. He often said that if he'd graduated about the same time as David Hockney, who was a good few years behind him, galleries then were much more willing to take a chance on a new artist. Partly that, and partly, I suppose, because he stuck to what he wanted to paint. He had his own ideas, and he wasn't going to paint fashionable things. And I suppose he was unlucky. It was the time, when Saatchi and company were persuading people that Damien Hirst and Tracy Emin were the kind of artists to go for.
I would rate him as a slightly undiscovered, nearly old master. I think he's got that classic quality about his work, which needs to have more exposure, and then he could just keep going. It's theatrical, the way it's set up. Quite mask. Some of the figures are quite mask-like. I mean, it's different because he does so many different things. He does still lifes, he does landscape, he does the figure studies. I'm most interested in the figure studies. And when he has a group of figures, there's a dynamic going on which you don't quite know. So it's up to you to try and formulate your own story around each picture. Because somebody will be looking out at you, somebody will be looking off to the side, and you have to work out in your own mind what's gone on, what's happening. But his style was so unique, wasn't it? I found his style unique. So comparing him to other artists is difficult.
But it's the uniqueness that makes him
Special.
interesting.
Yeah, and special and collectible.
Called me over to his studio and he said, I would like you to choose a picture for yourself and Sheila from my collection that was in the studio. So we looked around at all the pictures, and that one, although the condition isn't great, absolutely talked to me. And I said to Nick, I would love to have that picture. He said, well, it's yours. Now, the reason I like it is because that epitomises part of Nick's thinking and work, that you have two characters. One is looking directly at you, and the other, the male, is looking at the lady. But that then brings us into a triangle, because you are suddenly involved in that picture. The lady's looking at you, you're looking at the lady, you're looking at the man. There is a conversation piece that is running between the three of you. And that's the beauty of Nick's work, that he brings you into his paintings. Also, you have in that his symmetry work. Everything is held on parallel lines and vertical lines, so you can't move out of the space that is created, so you concentrate on those two figures only. I think it's brilliant. All three engage you. You think, what are they looking at? What are they saying to each other? What's happening down below? Because it's obviously a first floor window. We have the shadow here of a door maybe, and I think that brings you again to having a conversation with the three people. And the tones within the picture, they're all in the mid-range. There's nothing strong shouting out at you, and that is the beauty and the subtlety of Nick's work. These are little sketches that Nick would do as preparation for an oil painting. They're small vignettes, but they are studies of figures, how he'd like them actually to come out on the paintings. So they're double-sided, as you can see. So each one is worked, his mind is working all the time on how to prepare the composition. The same with this one. We have a series of portraits, so he's getting the angle right and also the expression right. Then again we have the vignettes at the bottom, and we can turn over again, and there's a whole series of small sketches. This is his mind working before he actually starts to paint. Nick came from an iconic art school, the Glasgow Art School, which is renowned for the colourists, but he doesn't fit that band really. So although he was trained at Glasgow, he went out onto his own set of rules with painting, and I think you can't pigeonhole him. He's unique. And I think on that basis, that's why he deserves recognition. So, yeah, I think that's where I'd put him, just on his own, out on a limb, being unique, being Nick Simington.
It was like a dichotomy. He wanted, in the abstract, absolutely to be recognised, to be successful, etc. But he equally was not interested in doing the things that a more person who was focused on that as their main goal would do, because all he wanted to do was paint. So marketing, promoting, etc. He relied on other people. He had good friends, good family who would do what they could. But he wasn't a natural marketer. Daddy was like that. He didn't play the game, and he didn't go to the right garden parties, and he didn't put in the time on the promotion because, quite understandably, his passion was art and he wanted to paint. So I think what he would have wanted was for somebody to come along and say, this is the greatest work I've ever seen, I'm going to put £1 million into promoting you and making you a huge success. And for it to happen, he absolutely wanted it to happen. But for him, anything that took time away from him actually having an idea for a painting, creating the next painting, there was always a list. I mean, even when he finally retired from painting, there was a list of 17 paintings that were the next 17. So, there was never a time for promotion.
Nicholas continued painting into his 80s and was delighted when the magazine Artists and Illustrators shortlisted him for the Artist of the Year award. Ill health eventually forced him to hang up his paintbrushes and put away his sketch pads at the age of 86. He died at his home in Old Buckenham in 2020, aged 89. By his bedside were his devoted wife Barbara and their sons Aidan and Liam.